Aisha Best. I'm part of TAP steering for this number one town hall meeting that we're having at 10 a.m. I also have all 5 of the negotiating team members here. Basically, all of these meetings are going to be formatted as article questions unpacked first, followed by clarification questions that will be answered that based off of feedback of social media and in-person dialogue, followed by prepared answers that were sent in from our website, followed by a live Q&A. That is the order of our agenda. So we're going to get started, and I believe Stacy is up. She is going to be talking about definitions article today, and if you have your hymnals, aka your contract, your definitions is going to be article 4, and I'm going to let her speak. Thank you. You're muted.
Would help if I wasn't. Thank you. So this is a small article with big concepts. And sometimes where there are things that seem gray, when you read the definitions as they're intended to be read, that gives you a clearer picture of what the intent is elsewhere in the contract. So to start out, we'll talk about one of our wins is airport standby is now a designated airport standby in the IFC's home base or co-base. So no IFC reserve or line holder can be pulled off a trip mid-pairing out of base and put on airport standby somewhere other than their base or co-base. Another one that we have that is a real win for us is originally scheduled pairing and originally scheduled pairing footprint. And these address the issue of retiming, because an originally scheduled pairing is now a pairing as it was originally put on your schedule. So they can't modify you or reassign you. And now the new footprint, as it were, becomes, if they cancel, they can give you a trip in that footprint instead. Your OSP is your OSP, and that never changes. Something else that we've added is we've expanded the red-eye duty period, and we have the red-eye segments. So this together, these definitions, they give you better protections when you see the red-eye restrictions elsewhere in the contract. And they also increase the number of trips that are eligible for that night override pay. And that was an issue that we really wanted to clean up. So now a red-eye segment is any pairing that operates 2 hours or more into the red-eye period. And now I guess we'll get to a topic that is at the forefront of the conversation. It's a biggie, so get comfy. We're going to talk about critical coverage, and I'm going to touch on IROPS and attendance. And these are topics where the definitions of our contract just really make these items grievable. So we're going to start with critical coverage. There is no reference to the IBBS in this definition at all. The definition is the law for all intents and purposes for us is in flight, and no one, ed or otherwise, cannot change it. It is the definition, and any policy they create cannot negate it. The second part of the definition I know has been confusing for some people. That is corporate speak. It talks about why the company wants the critical coverage days, but it's not relevant to when it can be applied. So we'll focus on the first part of that definition. These days are defined days, and they are due to pre-designated holidays or 24 hours or greater at level 3 IROPS. So they have to set the dates around holidays in advance the way they currently do. The only time the company can add on days during the year is if they declare a level 3 IROP and it goes on for 24 hours or more. And we don't see a lot of those. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to the definition for IROPS, because that's related. So the company has never declared a single department IROP, ever. They're always company-wide, and the pilots have triggers. So the company can't declare an IROP that violates the pilot contract. The only way they could declare an IROP for just in-flight would be in the case of a crew shortage. But there's a caveat there. One of the stipulations is that the situations causing an IROP are beyond the control of the company. And once again, to be clear, if the crew shortage was within the company's control to prevent, meaning they caused it, it does not qualify as an IROP. So first they'd have to declare a level 3 for in-flight only, and name the cause as a crew shortage. Then we would say that they have to prove the shortage is not their own doing. If they were to persist, we would grieve that under Article 21, which is non-disciplinary grievances. This is an arbitration, which is like a court case. The company has a burden of proof, as do we. The facts and the numbers don't lie. We would make the case that the staffing shortage is the result of mismanagement, understaffing, and overscheduling. And that creates the gridlock that forces IFCs to call out when we would otherwise balance ourselves by picking up, trading, swapping, and dropping. And then when they impose critical coverage on top of that, that just compounds the problem because it discourages IFCs from picking up and it puts a hold on reserve balancing, further blocking up the grid. So we'd handle any changes to the attendance policy the same way. And I just want to touch on attendance, even though it's not part of definitions, but because it is kind of related to what I just spoke about. So we'd handle that the same way if we felt they were posing an undue burden or a hardship on in-flight, or if we felt we could prove that we were being punished for something that is company mismanagement, not on in-flight. So I hope I've done a good job of explaining why, even if something seems gray on the surface, the company doesn't have complete freedom to make changes thanks to definitions and non-disciplinary grievances in our contract. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Sonia. That concludes our article discussion on definitions. We wanted to start out with the basics. The definitions is part of the bread and butter of your contract. And if you can't understand the definitions of the words, you can't actually interpret and understand what is being read in your contract. So we're gonna move on. The next article discussion that we are going to be talking about is actually going to be Brendan. He's going to be talking about the extended duty day. He's going to give the story behind that as it relates also to E14, 16, 18, and also bring you some clarification. Thank you, Brendan.
Oh, thank you, Taisha. Appreciate that. I'm Brendan Moriarty. I'm the LAX-based NT member on the call. I appreciate everybody joining. Obviously, extended duty days and scheduled duty day length are two of the most important topics to in-flight crew members, and as a result to us as a negotiating team throughout the bargaining process. We all understood from the very beginning that those two issues were going to be clear issues that we were focused on and fighting as hard as we could to see improvements in. And one of the biggest wins in the tentative agreement, we feel, is our victory in getting our scheduled duty day reduced from 14 hours to 13 hours. That's a huge win, and the vast majority of pairings now going forward, once we ratify the agreement, will only be able to be built to 13 hours in length. We did also get a carve out to protect the long two-leg transatlantic and other turns over 9 hours of block time. So the only pairings that can be built to 14 hours are those long turns, and every other pairing in the pairing set needs to be built under 13 hours. So that is a huge win in and of itself. And it also ties in with the extensions, duty extensions, day of operations. And we all know, as in-flight crew members ourselves on the negotiating team, we've all experienced the pain, both mental and physical, of extended duty days, especially those days that go 18 hours and longer. So again, this was one of our top priorities to address in the agreement. And while we weren't able to eliminate the E18 concept altogether, which was our goal, and we proposed many different ways to address that issue and be able to move beyond in-flight crew members being extended to those times, the company just was not willing at this time to move off of their position. And their position is that they basically, given the nature of the operation and the way they choose to manage the operation and run the business, that they require basically the ability to extend IFCs, certain IFCs beyond those limits. And no matter what argument we made, whether it came to safety, because we all know that at those lengths of duty, we can see increased risk when it comes to safety related issues. No matter what we argued and we bargained hard over this issue, the company was not willing to eliminate E18 altogether. But given the fact that we were able to reduce the scheduled duty day, now only pairings, the number of pairings that would be subject, that could be built and be subject to extensions to 18 hours are fewer than they are currently, because pairings can only be built to 13, vast majority of them. And just finally, I'd like to go back to the safety related issues when it comes to really lengthy duty days. And I'd just like to remind all of the in-flight crew members on the call and listening to the recording that we do have the ability to call fatigue whenever we feel that we're unable to perform our duties as flight attendants due to fatigue. And we were able to codify language in the duty extensions section that ensures that an in-flight crew member should feel able to and safe and uncoerced when it comes to using the fatigue protections in the agreement. And that's a matter of safety. And if an in-flight crew member does not feel safe to operate, she or they should not be operating and should use their fatigue protections. So I think that covers what I wanted to cover. Taisha, you can let me know otherwise.
I'm just going to ask you to clarify. Can you clarify the process and what's new about the fatigue review committee, please?
Oh yeah, so the fatigue review committee, another win that we got in this agreement was that a member of our union, an in-flight crew member, will be a voting member on the fatigue event review committee, which does review the circumstances surrounding each fatigue report and is able to determine the cause or suspected cause of the fatigue report. And having a union member, having an in-flight crew member on the board in order to ensure that the in-flight crew member's story is being heard and the circumstances are reviewed in a way that honors the intent of fatigue protections is super important. We also were able to get an extension on the submission of fatigue reports as well. Currently, they're required in a very short time after the fatigue event itself. And obviously, when you're fatigued, you should not be worried about completing a report form in the hours that you should be getting your rest. So I think that's it, Taisha.
Absolutely, thank you. Is Dee here, and is her connectivity stable? Dee is going to actually be talking about VPTO and PTO, and is also going to make a clarifying statement as it relates to benefits related to all of that as well. So I'm going to hand this off to Dee to talk about PTO, VPTO, all of that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. So with the PTO and the VPTO, we had a very large request from our group through our surveys to figure out a way to preserve their PTO from being constantly used by the company for every time they call out on FMLA or use for disability or even an OJI or a sick call, that their accounts were constantly being drained and that they had no time to use any other of their PTO for a vacation or time off or to supplement their salary. So after much debate, we decided to go with a program rather than lock it into a sick bank, because there were people that said that they didn't want to have a sick bank either. We figured out a way to lock it into a bank that was protected, called VBTO. And we asked the company to give us a large increase in PTO as well. The only way we could get the large increase in PTO was to go with a VPTO bank. So you're not really, people are talking about losing PTO. You're not losing any PTO. The company is actually increasing your PTO to give you vacation. You will have to separate the two banks and have a certain amount in VPTO, and you will have all of the rest of your PTO to use as you see fit. The process will take a year to totally implement, which is why your PTO looks a little strange in the numbers. But you have to look at the total accrual line at the very end. And that's how we're going to get an increase in PTO. We haven't gotten an increase in 22 years. I'm not sure if I just lost my internet. No, I'm still on.
You're there, Dave.
Okay, because I have two devices on and one is completely clicking off. So I'm sorry, guys. It's an issue with Comcast at my house this morning, of course, when you didn't want to have an issue this morning. So I think that explains the PTO versus the VPTO, how it's going to be secured in two different banks.
Okay, just for housekeeping, Dee, I put your other name in the waiting room. Your other device, the speaker needed to be turned off, just letting you know.
Now, see, that speaker wasn't working today, which is why I turned that device off. So, okay, thanks.
Back. All right. So next up, so Dee, did you reduce credit flying as R&R? Reduce credit flying, I'm sorry, and part-time program that will be sunsetting.
Hang on, Taisha. I'm trying to shut the other device down. I hope I did. So.
All right, you're good. I put your other one in the room, so you don't have to touch that. I'll handle that.
Oh, I just shut it off.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the reduced credit flying. So I made some notes here. So we had a large group of flight attendants ask us to look into the CrewFlex program because it was so limited with the availability. They were locked into 6 months. They were earning a little PTO, and they're not eligible for insurance, and they wanted to drop to zero. The company was not, here we go again. All right, the company wasn't willing to even entertain the drop to zero. They tell us that they hire us to come to work, that they're not interested in letting people drop to zero and then pick up off of the trade board or perhaps premium pay trips to build their own line. So there was no way we could get them to agree to drop to zero. So how we came up with a compromise for our in-flight group was to go to a reduced credit flying. We were able to get in negotiations, get the company to agree every single month at every single base to offer 7% flying to the reduced credit line. You would bid this line and you would get between 35 or a maximum of 45. And of course you could drop to 35. You will earn full PTO. You will have the opportunity to participate in the medical insurance if you meet the number of hours yearly, which I can explain as well. And you would not be locked in for 6 months. CrewFlex currently will sunset. It's going to take either 1 to 3 cycles. We're not sure. So that's 3 times at the maximum CrewFlex would be offered. So that would be 3 more times. That would be 1.5 years, possibly, until they can get the programming done. Let's see, lose my train of thought because these devices are making me crazy today. So how you stay current if you want to continue participating in insurance while you're flying a 35-hour credit reduced line is that the other months that you fly, you would have to make up the hourly difference. The magic number that they use over a period of a year look back in October is 65 hours a month. So if you flew low, like 3 months out of the year at 35, then you probably would have to fly, I'm not a mathematician, but I tried to do it this morning, about 75 hours a month credit. Now you could be using your VPTO or your PTO to supplement your salary to get to that 75 hours. But at the end of the year, you just would have to equal it all out to average 65 hours a month. And the reason for this is because our insurance is tied into everybody else in the company. And this is the policy for everyone else. They have to have the minimum hours per month to get the credit for insurance. So we were hoping that the reduced credit line would satisfy the great number of flight attendants that like to drop down and only work low hours every month, or some months out of the year.
All right, thank you, Dee. I apologize everyone for the reverb and all of the connection issues we've been having for this meeting. Thank you for your patience. So that concludes our article and also clarification discussion portion of this 1 hour town hall. We're going to move on to prepared questions. The prepared questions that were sent in as a housekeeping note, some of these have already been answered by our negotiating team on this town hall within the specific clarification topics that you have just heard. Again, for anyone that is recording or seeing this recording later, any submitted questions have already may have already been discussed by our negotiating team within their article or specific clarifying discussion. We're going to move to Sonia. There was a question that was asked about Mint. And this one is, when will we get more flying in Fort Lauderdale and LAX, currently restricted only to JFK and Boston? And this was submitted by Lawrence.
All right, great. Well, hi, everyone. I apologize. I'm in the airport doing airport visibility, so I can only connect in the airport wearing my mask. I apologize. I'm Sonia Payne. I'm the Boston negotiating team representative. I'm also a member of the OBL Mint domestic program. So I guess, off the bat, I think everyone in LAX or Fort Lauderdale bases would love to have Mint flying, have there, to share the wealth. There's so much flying through your base. It does seem logical that at a certain point, those you would have your own mint qualified role IFCs there. Unfortunately, the company has not shared their business plan with us. They have not shared whether or not they are going to extend the qualified roles to crew members that are based in LAX or Fort Lauderdale. So I just don't have any solid information to offer that, except that logically it seems like they should, and hopefully, they'll get that feedback that we keep telling them that it would make more sense fiscally to have those bases there.
All right, thank you, Sonia. The next question, and I'm just scrolling through, trying to put them in some sort of order. PBI is mentioned as a co-base to Fort Lauderdale. We currently do not have pairings that start in PBI, but moving forward, if TA2 is agreed, the company would be then adding pairings ASB out of PBI. So I guess the question is, PBI as a co-base, what does that look like? Whoever wants to take that question.
Since I think Dee would have ordinarily done it, but she's having such issues with her internet, I can field it if you like. You have me, Taisha?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. So currently PBI is a co-base for the pilots. So the company just wanted to include that as one of the exceptions that could be a co-base, since in their eyes, it already is a co-base existing, even though it isn't for us. The company could choose to designate it as a co-base the same way in JFK we have LaGuardia. It's slightly outside of the 40-mile parameters for any new co-base, but it's our understanding that it's not terribly difficult to get to, as opposed to, say, Newark, where you are crossing state lines and paying $60 in tolls. So since it was currently operating as a co-base for the pilots, we were willing to agree to that. But it's not a guarantee. It's not necessarily meaning they're just, as soon as this ratifies, going to suddenly start building pairings out of there. It just means that they could designate it as a co-base down the line if they chose to do so.
Thanks, Stacy, for helping out. And I will
Oh,
also,
and now you sound great.
but I can't figure out now. I can't get the video. But anyway, thanks for helping out on that. And I will say we did not have any concerns prior from the majority of our crew members at the Fort Lauderdale base regarding this issue when we started negotiations.
I actually heard it would go very senior, so I don't know.
Yeah, we have a lot of flight attendants that live up that way. But the company is currently providing the transportation if you want it. If you want to cancel the transportation, you can, and they'll pay for your parking while you're up there. It's very inexpensive. It used to only be $7.
All right, thank you for answering that question. I'm scrolling through, there were still some late submitted questions, so I'm going to bring Sonia back to answer another question about OBL. Their question is, what OBL, can you talk about OBL reserves and the rules around that, please?
Sure. So I'm going to take a stab and say that this is asking about whether or not a shared reserve component will still be in the qualified roles. So once adequate base staffing is achieved, and I know that that's a weird gray word, if you look at our qualified roles, article number 29, on the first page in the box, there is an adequate base staffing projected date of mid-2022. So we do have, something to hold the company accountable for in the world of adequate base staffing. So when we do hit that staffing number, 12% of the qualified role IFCs will not have to sit shared reserve. So based on the number of IFCs that are qualified for the OBL and the MS, that could fluctuate. More people in the program, 12% will be a greater number. So we actually want to see a robust amount of people who do have the qualified roles qualification, because it would allow for more people to not have to sit shared reserve. Again, that's not going to kick in until the adequate base staffing, which we are seeing in the contract does say mid-2022. Am I missing anything, Taisha?
Can you clarify, there was a lot of discussion as it relates to when and how an OBL or Mint reserve is used as it relates to the codification of the level 2, as well as which aircraft and how, as well as JRA. So if you want to expand on that verbally for this meeting.
Yeah, certainly. So when we had the integration of the qualified roles program back in July, the company then afterwards added some new language about utilizing the qualified role crew members in the 3 or 4 position on the Mint aircraft. They were not willing to remove that, and we fought very hard trying to say that, you know, we never used to have to support the 3 and 4 position previously, not understanding why that is going forward. However, we were able to state that all available reserves had to be utilized. So what that means is that, you know, every day we look at the daily reserve grid, it shows you which IFCs are available for how many days and what, you know, their qualifications, if they're LOD, if they're qualified roles, they have, you know, certain designations next to them. We have an opportunity to now look back and say, you know, I was assigned this F3 position, there were available reserves. You can now grieve that to the company following our new grievance procedure and say you did not follow the proper sequence of assigning this. With that being said, if it is assigned to you now, if you are assigned to an F3 or F4 position during your shared reserve block, you will be getting JRA pay. So that's kind of like a new concept for us. This is a number that's better than the qualified roles pay. So I know certain people thought that we should be guaranteed our qualified role pay if we're working in the 3 or 4 position, but getting the JRA pay is actually a larger financial gain for us. So we were really happy about that. In the level 2 or higher, we'll also get the JRA pay. Another thing, if I can just state that may not have been touched on in the qualified roles, is that if you are working and your pairing is canceled, we actually get pay protected for the qualified role pay now, which is not something that we had before. I think I touched on everything there with the JRA. Let me know if I didn't, Taisha.
No, I think that was perfect. And if any clarifications are needed, we can send that out on a separate communication. The next question is, there was a huge number of crew members who didn't vote either way last time. What plan is there to gain more participation in voting this time around? Who's taking this question?
I can take that one as well. Yeah, I can take that one as well. You know, quite frankly, our last vote came in a very weird time in our professional career here. You had many IFCs that were still out on COVID leaves, and they were very absorbed and concerned in their personal lives, which we all completely understand. So we can't fault anyone if their leveling of engagement was not what we were hoping it was going to be during that period. There was a huge presidential election. There was just a lot going on that people may not have their focus was not here. We're a complete 180 now. Everybody's back on the line. Everyone is very engaged. We've experienced a really weird time as in-flight crew members here at JetBlue. So I think that the engagement here is far greater than it would have been last year. So trying to get the word out, I feel we're already at a better stage just by having our crew members back here and having everyone back on the line and talking and engaging and being out here. I don't think we're going to run into the same problem. You'll always have people that don't want to participate. And even if we reach out to them, they may tell us that they don't want to be contacted. They don't want to participate. And you know, we can only do so much at that point. But we do feel very strongly that we've got a much greater engaged group this time around.
All right, thank you, Sonia. Travis, I'm going to have you turn on the chat. The chat is going to be turned on for about 5 minutes to allow for people to submit live Q&A questions. If you have, as a housekeeping note, already submitted your question via the website, please do not resubmit. I already have that list, and we are trying to go through any live Q&A questions that have not already been addressed in this situation, town hall right now, or that has not been placed in the submitted questions that you sent from the website. So I'm going to continue on with the submitted questions. Here is a very short question from Sean. How many hours will a home reserve period last with TA2?
That's 12 hours. The answer is 12 hours.
All right, and the next question is, could you clarify the change from 24/7 to one calendar day off and 6 days? For example, I do red eye turn. If I duty off at 5 a.m. on Monday morning, can I report for a trip on Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. or does that entire Tuesday need to be off?
I can take that. So when we were negotiating, obviously this is a give and take here. The company came to us and said that they were really having a lot of difficulty with crew members that were having their 24/7 break on a layover. So they were finding that they were going illegal regularly. The crew members were having to be stranded for an additional day to get their full rest, and the company was having to utilize extra reserves to compensate for that flying. They just felt that, they needed a small buffer, and we agreed to that extra buffer. So 25 hours. Of course, if you're on a pairing and you're reduced to 24/01, you'll completely be legal, but they wanted a buffer for bidding purposes, just to not bring you down to the mandated threshold.
All right, thank you. This is from William. Just want to I'm going to reiterate this as an answer. Most of us have been scared of the dependability not being in the contract. If JetBlue decides to now change the dependability after the contract is ratified, what will our union do to protect this from that?
Shall I recover that one?
Just can you clarify with this specific? Yes, please.
Absolutely. So once again, the company does have managerial rights to set their own attendance policy. It's not something they were required by law to bargain with us, and they were adamant that they were not going to do so. That said, they do not have carte blanche to just change anything as they see fit. It is still grievable. If they were to decide to do something outrageous like double the point value, we're gonna grieve that. We're gonna say you're punishing us for something that's caused by your mismanagement and understaffing and overscheduling. And they'll say, well, you guys are calling out a ton. Well, why though? Why are we calling out a ton? Are we calling out more than we have historically? We're going to look at that because, there's a burden of proof in an arbitration. So, numbers have to be shown. Historical data will have to be shown. So we're going to see, okay, are we calling out more? But why? Are we calling out more because the company is understaffed and overscheduled, and now that's created a gridlock, and so that the IFCs are not able to drop a trip or trade a trip, and because now critical coverage might be in effect, they also, they don't feel comfortable picking up, so that further exacerbates the problem. There's no reserve balancing, again, further exacerbating the problem. So, we look at that and we present a case that shows that this is company mismanagement, not the fault of the IFCs. And so we would say, why should the IFCs be punished and bear the burden of an unjust policy or an overly burdensome policy for a problem that the company has created for themselves?
All right, thank you. One last question, and then I'm gonna circle back to you, Stacy, to answer Monica Harding's question. But there is a question here. How is retiming addressed? And then we'll move to live viewing.
Yeah, that one again is back to the definitions. When you look at the definition for originally scheduled pairing and the originally scheduled pairing footprint, those are now, anytime you see OSP or OSP footprint in the articles, you know that you can go back to that definition, and that says that it is the originally scheduled pairing as it was originally placed on the IFC's line. So if they change your report time, or they modify your trip, or you have a delay, and that time keeps getting extended, and by the time they finally cancel the trip, you were supposed to have ended at noon and now you're ending at 5, and they've canceled, and now they say, oh, we're going to assign you something that goes until 5. You say, well, that's outside of my footprint. They can't say, well, you have a new footprint. Your footprint is your footprint as it was originally on your line. There's no such thing as a new footprint, as for the purposes of when you see OSP or OSP footprint on the contract.
All right, thank you. So that concludes the comprehensive question list that was submitted. If your question wasn't read, for instance, there was a lot of FMLA and medical questions that, because there were so many, we are going to pull that into a different town hall and give that the space that it needs and honor that space for that specific subject so that we can clarify and not rush on all of those FMLA and medical questions. We're going to move to the Q&A. Travis, please turn off the chat so I can read and not get lost. So we're going to start with Monica Harding. Will they continue to pull off the most junior flight attendant rather than the most senior if the plane gets downsized 24 hours prior?
So it doesn't matter when the plane is down gauged for the purposes of our agreement. And I'm gonna flip over to just make sure that I don't lose my train of thought here. So what we did is we wanted to kind of find a balance. We didn't think that senior IFC on the crew should be sitting reserve due to the company deciding to change the way they manage their aircraft. So what we did here is if the person being pulled in a down gauge, so there's now an extra IFC, the person who is the extra IFC, if they are being released or if they are being changed to a deadhead, that will be the senior IFC. And if they are being put on reserve or reassigned into some other trip, then that goes in reverse seniority from the most junior up. Notwithstanding, if you are the only LOD on the trip and there's LOD segments remaining, you would have to remain on the trip. Same goes for a qualified role. If there are, if there's Mint flying on the trip and you are the Mint IFC, you're going to have to remain on the trip to fulfill that role. But notwithstanding those items, once again, if you are the senior person who is extra, they have to release you or they have to set you to deadhead. And if they are reassigning or assigning standby of any kind, then that would be the most junior IFC.
All right, thank you. Ernesto, are you on the call still or did he drop off? I have an LOG question. Did he drop off? Crystal, I also see your hand is raised. Why isn't there an LOD opt-out window on the contract? And why isn't there a pay protection for LOD on the contract since LOD is stuck on our schedule? As a housekeeping note, please refer to Article 28, Language of Destination A, that talks about opt-out. Does anyone want to talk about that? Brendan, you want to take that question?
Sure, I can handle that. Yeah, like you mentioned, Taisha, I believe there is some language around ability to opt out based on the needs of the operation every year. But to pay protection portion of that, agree. We agree as a negotiating team that the LOD should be pay protected, just as qualified roles are, which was a win. But we believe as well that the LODs should be pay protected if they're reassigned to non-LOD flying. The company see it that way. They argued that if you're not performing or role as a speaker on a position on a speaker flight that they didn't feel like they should have to pay LODs for that. We disagreed. We argued for it to be pay protected. That was not something that we could get in this first contract. Certainly something to fight for in a subsequent agreement. But yeah, I think that's the story on that.
All right, thank you. The next question is probably going to be to Sonia. This was asked by Jawan. Hello. He's asking about, is there any plan to discuss pay increases for those of us in the transatlantic cadre? And I do notice that there was some, so I'm going to have you take that one.
Yeah, sure. So the basic answer here is that in the contract, we do have language in the compensation section that says that nothing precludes the company from increasing pay in the qualified roles in order to either, keep people from leaving the program or to make it more attractive so people will participate. So while there's nothing currently changing the current pay structure for transatlantic, there's just a general catch-all that will allow them to do that if they'd like, and it doesn't have to open up a negotiation. It could just be something that's discussed between the union and the company.
Worth noting also is that provision, if they choose to enact that and pay more for the qualified role, that does become contractual.
Thank you, Stacy. Yes.
Yep, just going to
My
mention
favorite
that as well.
Cool. Actually, clarification for you, Sonia. It says in transatlantic pay, qualified IFCs operating in the TS core position F4, F5 will receive $2 per block hour in addition to their base pay. Is that different than what we currently have? Is it $1 what we currently have in transatlantic?
I will be honest with you, but not being a transatlantic cadre member, I would have to look back at that. I don't know off the top of my head what it currently is.
All right, Dawn, yeah, we will circle back on that answer. I believe that actually is an increase from what you previously had. I believe it was only $1 instead of $2, but we will circle back and give you clarifying information because you also messaged me on Facebook. So I will bring that question to you. The next question is, I just saw it and now I can't find it. I'm wondering if I'm reading wrong about the transit check going to $40. Can someone explain the $40 transit check language that's in the contract, please?
I'll take
You got
it.
it, Stacey? Okay.
Okay. No, the transit checks aren't changing. They will be what they are. The change there is that if you are located in a place that has the transit check, or if you are turning down parking at your base. So you don't want parking, and if applicable, there is a transit check and you choose neither of those, then you are eligible for a $40 stipend instead. I know that we had that you could concur up to $40 with receipts, but we always feel that money that you don't have to chase is better money, and it's more money because all you have to do is lose a receipt once, or miss the deadline and that money's gone. Or say you're someone who gets rides to the airport, you should still get compensated for gas mileage, wear and tear on your car. Perhaps you take some other mode of transport that doesn't come with receipts. So a $40 stipend that is guaranteed and automatic is better than, in our view, than money you have to chase. So that's the only change, but the transit checks will be as they are.
Thank you. Dee, did you discuss why incentivized vacations were removed? Can you talk about that? Did you discuss that?
No, so incentivized vacations exist because the company wants us to take a vacation when their slow time is occurring. Nothing in this agreement would preclude them from continuing to try and get us to take a vacation during these times. But now that we're going to have VPTO, there has to be a lot of weeks available so that everyone can get a choice in vacation, where now that there isn't. So incentivized vacation also only works for those in-flight crew members that can take a vacation during that time. Many of our crew members have children. They can't take vacation when schools, are in session, usually when those vacations are offered. So we tried to level the field, get more PTO, which we did, a great increase, and you'll probably not see incentivized vacation offered but you're getting the vacation accrual higher. So that should offset that issue.
Thank you. The next question is, please answer the question regarding of having to use PTO for FMLA. Why is the company able to do this?
Well, the company did this specifically to in-flight. If you read the company handbook, it says that FMLA is an unpaid program and that you may use PTO to cover this. I would say that going forward in the future with a ratified agreement, this would be a grievable item because we're not being treated the same as every other work group. It would have to be looked at to see if every other work group is being charged with the PTO use. This will be an interesting item.
Yeah, Dee, and just to follow up on that, that's one of the reasons, because the company has decided that, as you say, to force folks that have qualified FMLA leave to use their paid time off. That's one of the big reasons why having those protected vacation weeks in VPTO is such a for those folks who are taking care of a loved one with an illness or taking care of a medical condition of their own, that not have to worry about not having any take a vacation. So it lines up with those two things are connected there.
All right, thank you. We're gonna end with this last question. With this question, with all these wins for TA2, did we lose anything in TA2 that needs to be discussed?
Yeah, I can take that. I just want to make sure that I have the list in front of me because I don't want to, I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. So some of them are not huge. You know, we have the 12-hour wrap. The company originally, they never intended to agree to a 10-hour wrap. They made a mistake. We rejoiced. They owned it, and they made it very clear that they were not going to be bargaining over that in the future if it was reopened. So it is the 10-hour wrap becomes the 12-hour wrap. That is mitigated by the fact that you cannot be assigned to an airport standby once you've been on a home reserve for 7 hours. There's limitations on how many airport standbys you can sit in a row, how many you can sit for the total month. We've created new timeframes for when those wraps can start. You can't be released to rest and put back on a new wrap later. So we do have more protections there. There's actually a lot of protections in reserve other than that one loss. Sick calls have to be made 3 hours prior to report, and that is because, you know, we have increased call times now. So the sick calls had to be in line with our call times. The company needs an opportunity to get a home reserve in. If I call out at exactly the reserve call out time, they're going to have to burn an airport standby. And once airport standbys are all used up, that's when they start junior manning and modifying IFCs who are at the airport. So that's not a thing we want to see, and that helps us protect the pairing and the schedule integrity. Let me see.
Stacy, would you mind if I fill in on the wrap issue on just a note here? The 10-hour wrap that we fought hard to maintain in the first tentative agreement, as Stacy said, was something the company was fighting hard the other way in order to extend. The 10-hour wrap was the best in the industry, and that's why we were fighting hard to maintain the shortest reserve availability period in the industry. that was, like Stacy said, something that the company was not happy with and wanted to extend well beyond 12 hours. But the compromise at 12 hours because of the way bargaining happened. But like Stacy says, the protections that are included in the reserve article, we believe, well make up for the adjustment to the reserve availability period more in line with where the industry is.
Yep. A couple others. We already discussed the 25/7 instead of 24/7. And again, that's just logistics. You know, we can't be, you know, butting right up against the FAA legality. We have the 18th month roll off for entries and in the file and letter of conversation. This again is mitigated immensely by the new ability to limit what the company can enter in your file in the first place. So that was a trade we were willing to make. You know, they can't put anonymous letters in your file. They can't put things in your file that you haven't been able to see, etc. Let's see, what else? Line holders can only call out for the next scheduled pairing. You used to be able to call out for the multiple days in a row. Now it's you call out for your next pairing. We talked about the incentivized vacation weeks. We have the E16 pay currently. Now we parsed it out to E14, E16, and E18. So your pay would be in line with the duty day that is scheduled based on what your original duty day was scheduled for between those three breakdowns. And we worked that out because we noticed that the people who were doing the duty day up to 8 hours were not getting any additional pay until they hit the E16 mark. If you went over 16 hours, that was the only time those people got extra pay. And we felt that a duty day scheduled below 8 hours is far more common and far more likely to run into issues of going into an extended duty day. So we wanted to make sure that the people who were running into E14 were really getting that compensation. And when you are coming back from a leave, used to be you had to pick up twice the amount of hours, and the company wanted to go back to that. And from personal experience, I can tell you how stressful and just awful it was to try and pick up that crazy amount of hours in, you know, just a week when you're coming back from leave, and especially if you've been injured and you don't feel you're so sure about how much you're really going to be physically capable of. So in order to keep the number of hours what it currently is, which is really quite low, we traded it from 7 days to pick up. You have 5 days to pick up those hours. And that's pretty much. Brendan, you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, in general, yeah, I don't think there's, not much else there. We didn't view anything necessarily major law in the loss category. I think in this discussion also, just to remind everybody, when it comes to wins versus losses versus codifying current language from the ISM, there's a lot of discussion around that issue, and I'd like to just remind everybody that, as we all and have been made been made clear to us the last several months, especially over this summer, the company currently has the ability to change whatever policy they feel necessary or desire to change, and that's one of the main differences and the tremendous gains and wins that we will get once we have a contract in place. The company will no longer be able to do that. And also, we know that it doesn't matter what's printed in current company policy, because they often choose not to follow their own stated policy as well. So we view, and we feel like everyone should view, anything that is in the agreement is a win, because currently we only have things that the company is willing to offer and go along with under current company policy. And that all changes once we have a legally binding contract that we can hold the company accountable to through the grievance process. So I appreciate you, Stacy, letting me add on.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with that part.
Yep. So the part of the reason why I actually asked that question is our work group is really big into transparency. We stated before that our wins are greatly outnumbering our losses, but there were many questions asking what the losses were. So I wanted to memorialize on the first town hall so that we can spend the next 8 town halls talking specifically about the subjects within the contract and forward and upward and have a unified addressing as it relates to the information in our contract. So that concludes, we've run over by technically a minute because we started a little late. That concludes our first town hall with the specific articles and clarification subjects that we spoke to right now. I do want to do a housekeeping note again. If there were a lot of medical, parental family leave, and insurance questions that were asked in the prepared questions, those are going to be addressed in a separate town hall to honor the amount of need and time to answer all of those questions. And that way we can memorialize those specific articles and subjects in its own separate town hall, and you have the ability to research those topics better. So I want to thank everyone for showing up at this town hall. And we look forward to having another one. Please reach out to your TAP members. You have a list of the town halls that are going to be happening over the duration of this contract rollout. And again, if you aren't able to make any a town hall that you wanted to show up to, those recordings will be placed 24 to 36 hours after the end of this town hall. So we appreciate you coming and we hope to see you next time. Have a good morning.